Hey there, I'm Aspiringspike. Welcome back. We have another Pioneer deck tech and gameplay this week. This is an Abzan midrange deck. If you haven't been paying a ton of attention to Pioneer in the last couple of weeks, Field of the Dead, be it black-green Field of the Dead strategies or Bant, or there's some mono-green strategies as well, sort of emerged in full force, and they were beating up pretty hard on the various mid-range control strategies in Pioneer. And then mono black aggro, which is a very resilient and fast aggro deck, has pretty quickly taken the banner of the best deck in the format. It has a very good Field of the Dead matchup, and then it has a ton of game against the other decks in the format as well. So I built this Abzan mid-range deck with the intent to really beat the mono black aggro deck, while also having a decent matchup against the Field of the Dead decks. And I feel like we have accomplished that with this 75, but with some of the card choices we've chosen to include, we do lose percentage points against some of the tier 2 and 3 decks of the Pioneer metagame. If you enjoy Abzan midrange and you're looking for a way to beat up on mono black aggro, I highly recommend this deck. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the card choices and run it through a league. I don't want to spend too much time on the mana, but we have 4 Blooming Marsh. I really like that this card casts all of our 1 through 3 drops, comes into play untapped on the first 3 turns, and then we're playing 4 of each Shockland, which I think is necessary in a deck that has pretty stringent mana requirements. You need double black for Liliana, you need double green for Questing Beast and Courser, you need Abzan colors for Siege Rhino, you need black, white for Obsidat, you need white for Gideon out of the sideboard. I think that you need 4 of each Shockland. And we're playing a 2-2 split of Isolated Chapel and Sunpetal Grove. I really do like that our checklands are both white, and because all of our white spells are 4 and 5 mana spells, and so it's really bad. I was playing some Concealed Courtyards, and it felt bad to have a fast land that you needed to come into play untapped to cast your 4 and 5 mana spell. So I cut all the Concealed Courtyards. I'm really happy with 2 Isolated Chapel and 2 Sunpetal Grove. I think the mana is good. We're playing 1 Plains and 1 Swamp, mainly for Field of Ruin, just so we can get basics to put into play, and I don't want to play any forests in my Obsidat deck. We're also playing 2 Castle Locthwain. This card is just incredibly strong in Pioneer. You are super incentivized to find room for at least 2 Castle Locthwains in your just black decks in Pioneer. This card is great. Really recommend trying to find room for these in your black decks. Going into the actual spells, what might look a little weird here is we're only playing 2 copies of Fatal Push. I'm sure 4 Thoughtseize doesn't need too much defending for you, but really what's happening here is we're playing a 2-2 split in the main deck of Fatal Push and Legion's End. Legion's End is really well positioned in Pioneer right now. The Exile clause is really relevant against mono black aggro, and it exiles all the zombies for Field of the Dead. And I have found when you're main decking 2 copies of Legion's End, your Fatal Pushes can get a little awkward, especially when you have Abrupt Decays. You just have so many answers to cheap creatures, and you just have fewer answers to bigger creatures when you have 4 Fatal Push, 2 Legions in your main deck. So, and we also don't have any copies of Fabled Passage to help trigger Revolt for Fatal Push. I wanted to find room for Fabled Passage, but I think with our hard mana requirements, there just isn't room for a Fabled Passage package. So I have liked this 2-2 split. We have the 3rd Fatal Push in the sideboard. I could see wanting access to the 4th, but I kind of think that just more like Legion's End in the matchups you want Fatal Push for is usually going to be better. So that's sort of the split we have there. We're playing 3 Once Upon a Times. I could certainly see this being a different number of Once Upon a Times. I've liked 3. I do think that drawing multiples in a deck that is needs to play to the board can be a little awkward sometimes. You can't play to the board because you have Once Upon a Time. You have your extra copies of Once Upon a Time, and you can't play to the board on a turn you need to. So we're playing 3 copies. I like that this lets us find extra copies of Siege Rhino when we need to drain our opponent out. It lets us see Obsidat more often. We'll talk about this a little bit later. but I think this card is very well positioned in the format. Lets us find our one copy of Blood Baron of Viscopa our one copy of Blood Baron of Viscopa more often. And I mean, I don't think Once Upon a Time needs a ton of defending. I think this card is really certainly emerged as a staple of green decks in Pioneer and Modern, just in Magic in general. And I think you need to be finding, you know, you have to have a very good reason to not play this card in your green decks, I've found. We're playing 3 copies of Abrupt Decay. Abrupt Decay is a card I have been really high on in Pioneer, but I think it's not as well positioned as it used to be. There are a lot of decks that are playing permanents that are 4 mana, or Field of the Dead decks don't have a ton of targets for Abrupt Decay. Rankle is a huge problem out of the mono black aggro deck, so is Spawn of Mayhem. You can't decay either of those. And so we kind of have a split of 3 Abrupt Decays, 1 Ultimate Price to deal with. The Ultimate Price kills Rankle, kills Spawn of Mayhem. I think Ultimate Price is better than Doomblade or Cast Down. Specifically better than Cast Down because this kills Rankle out of the mono black aggro decks. We're playing 2 Sylvan Caryatids. I was playing more copies in some of my earlier drafts, but when you start adding more Once Upon a Times, which is what I've been doing, it makes sense to me to cut Sylvan Caryatids, because this can find lands in the hands that you need to find lands, and this can also potentially find a Sylvan Caryatid for you to play on turn 2. 2 Scavenging Oozes in the main deck, the 3rd one in the sideboard. I like 2 in the main deck just as a fair creature, and then I like to bring in the 3rd one when Graveyard Hate matters. And I've liked that in a lot of my Black-Green X midrange decks in Pioneer so far. Liliana the Last Hope, really, really strong in a deck with Siege Rhino and Questing Beast. Just being able to recur these is very strong. And the +1 ability is well positioned in Pioneer right now with all the Mana Elves and with all the mono black aggro decks. I like Liliana the Last Hope a lot right now. 2 Corso Krufix. I think this card is just a staple of black-green midrange decks in Pioneer. I could see playing more. I wouldn't play less than 2. I think this card is just really, really strong. We're playing 3 Murderous Riders. I kind of wanted to play 2 Murderous Rider, 1 Abzan Charm, but my deciding factor was Murderous Rider plays better with Once Upon a Time, and it plays a little bit better with Liliana, because if it does go to the graveyard, you can recur it. Keep in mind that if Murderous Rider dies, it goes to the bottom of your library, so if you are just milling it from the top of your deck with the -2, or if it gets Thoughtseized, you can recur it, but this isn't maybe as good a synergy as you might think. 4 Siege Rhino, one of the main reasons to be Abzan. I think this card is good at the moment. I think if you have Siege Rhino in your deck, you want to play 4 because they play so well together. And Questing Beast might look a little odd, but the more and more I play with Questing Beast in Pioneer, the more I'm impressed by it. This card has a ton of text on it. It's very, very important for the Field of the Dead and Nexus matchups. The Questing Beast can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less ability is very important against Field of the Dead. Just blowing right past them, getting in, 8-12 damage with the Questing Beast against Field of the Dead happens a lot. And then you can drain them out with Siege Rhinos and Obsidat. That's kind of your main game plan. I honestly would kind of not mind playing 4 Questing Beasts, even though that they're legendary, and of course they have some diminishing returns being legendary. Because it has Death Touch, you can trade this card off pretty aggressively. It gets removed very, very often. And then if you just have a second one, I usually don't mind that too much. Having Vigilance, you can attack for 4 and then block and then play another Questing Beast. This card is just very, very strong, and I'd be looking for reasons to play this card in Pioneer. 2 Obsidats, a card that I think is really well positioned in Pioneer at the moment. It dodges a lot of the removal spells. It's good against the Field of the Dead decks. Being able to pressure their life total outside of combat is good. The blue-white control decks have very few ways to answer this card if you don't attack with it, so that's something you should keep in mind against blue-white control, is maybe you just don't attack into like an Azuria's Charm or a Settle the Wreckage. And 1 Blood Baron of Viscopa, again, kind of a metagamey card. Attacks through Field of the Dead zombies, which is very good. Kind of game over against mono black aggro. We're playing 1 in the main, 1 in the side. If the format changes, I could certainly see this card getting the axe, but for now, I've liked it. All right, that's the main deck. Let's go ahead and talk about the sideboard. Okay, quickly going over the sideboard, we have 3 Dark Betrayals. Might look a little weird when our main deck is already so well positioned against mono black aggro, But I have found the cards that you need to answer are Rankle and Spawn of Mayhem. We only have 4 main deck answers to those cards. So having a cheap 1 mana answer to those post board I think matters a lot. Also for the mono black matchup, we have the 3rd copy of Fatal Push, the 3rd copy of Legion's End, and the 1 copy of Bloodbaron Viscopa, which also comes in against most Field of the Dead matchups. And with these cards, you're very favored against mono black aggro. 1 Scavenging Ooze, another card I bring in against mono black aggro. I like this having the access to the 3rd copy against the blue-red Phoenix matchups, and a card that I think is just good to have access to 3 of in your 75. We're playing 3 Duress, which are pretty important against the blue-white control decks, against blue-green Nexus. I do think that Duress is not necessarily the most impactful card in Pioneer, but I do think that when you have so many cheap creature removal spells, you need to have access to a density of cards to bring in against the control and Nexus decks. So we have Duresses, we have Gideon Allies in the cards for the control matchups. We have access to the 4th Questing Beast, which is really important against control, really good against Nexus as well. Also, the 4th Questing Beast is good against the Field of the Dead decks. I certainly think it's correct to play 4 in your 75. I've liked 3 in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard. I could see just playing 4 in the main deck. This card is really, really good. And hopefully we see a little bit of just how well positioned Questing Beast is in this deck today, and how well it plays with Siege Rhino and Abzan. And 2 Noctis Grasp for mono green Devotion and the various green Stompy decks. So that's the deck. Let's go ahead and run it through a league and see how it performs. Okay, so here we are for round 1. We've lost the die roll. I have a 1-land hand. I'm going to go ahead and send this one back. This hand is clearly much better. It's a little awkward. Which land we want to put back, since if we put back Swamp, we no longer will have access to double black, which is important for Liliana, Murderous Rider, and Abzan, but we need double green in hand for Courser. I think I'm going to go ahead and put back the Swamp and trust that we'll find a black source down the line, but if this was a black-green dual land, this hand would be just a little bit smoother. Leading on Once Upon a Time, certainly a staple of Pioneer, certainly a card on the watch list as well. This card is a little bit format warping, and also, honestly, just a little warping for Magic in general. We're going to play the Godless Shrine tapped and pass to our opponent. They played the Temple Garden that they revealed. Usually good form to, if you're just going to play a land, play the land that you are getting off your Once Upon a Time. Playing against Bogles, which does not seem like this is going to go very well for us. One thing I do like about playing against Bogles here is you're going to see how the card choices we've chosen to make, like we're playing a lot of like Dark Betrayals in our sideboard, means we're not playing any Languishes. We're not playing any Liliana's Edicts, and we are just certainly suffering in matchups like this. Just kind of tier 2 or 3 decks that are trying to attack the metagame in a different way. I'm not sure if I'm gonna, I think we should Abrupt Decay Cartouche to use our mana here. Does not feel great. Does not feel great at all. And looking at the sideboard, we don't have a ton of good tools in this matchup. I can see Questing Beast's Death Touch being relevant. Bloodbaron of Viscopa and Abzan and Siege Rhino can maybe also race a start like this. So there's Unflinching Courage, which is going to make this race incredibly difficult, and Ethereal Armor. Probably not beatable at this point. Looks like we spewed off this Abrupt Decay a little too quickly. Can certainly attribute that a little bit to inexperience in the matchup, but hopefully we don't make that same play next game. So I do think I want the 4th Questing Beast here. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of these Murderous Riders. One creature that we could potentially be able to target out of our opponent in our opponent's deck is a Baral. That's a card that they could be playing to draw cards, very similar to Core Spirit Dancer in Modern. But I think I'm just going to fill out my deck with powerful threats that just fill out the curve, and I think we're just going to try to race our opponent. And then we have 3 Abrupt Decays that could kill a potential Baral. Maybe we don't want any Lilianas, although I could see like chumping with a Siege Rhino and then buying it back with a Liliana. I could see that being a line we take. Maybe we just play 2 Murderous Riders instead. Yeah, because this can still be a creature even if there's nothing to target in play. Weird matchup. Our deck is certainly not configured for this matchup, but we can do our best. And just like in Modern, a lot of times you'll see the Bogles deck stumble, and then you can just sometimes play a fair game against them. I do like this hand if we have a green source in the top 2 cards of our library. I think that we're likely to hit, but not... I guess it's kind of close. So we have 4, 8, 10, 11, 15. So we have 14 out of 53, and we have 2 looks. Not great odds. 3 Once Upon a Time adds to that, so 17 out of 53. I think that because this is a hand that can just actually race Bogles if we hit a green source, and this matchup is not one where I feel favored, I think that I'm going to keep. Oh, we should also add Sylvan Carriage. So 19 out of 53 and 2 looks at that. So not the worst odds. And if we do hit, this certainly seems like a hand that could race a Bogles deck between the Death Touching Questing Beast, multiple Siege Rhinos, Abzan flickering in and out. It's got a lot of the pieces that we need. Our opponent kept 7, which is certainly scary. Certainly scary. They're casting Once Upon a Time on their upkeep, which is, and they didn't find a card. So that was really weird. One, usually you should wait till you draw to cast Once Upon a Time so you have more information as to what you find. It also seems very strange to me that our opponent could miss on Once Upon a Time. There's no lands or creatures in the top 5. Sounds a little crazy to me. I think we're going to take the Cartouche of Knowledge here. A flying threat is going to be really tough, although I suppose they also have Griff Spoon, so we'll stop the extra card draw at least. Our opponent also led on they led on Botanical Sanctum instead of Forest, and now they couldn't cast this Griff Boon unless they top decked the White Source, and they did. Alright, so here's what we need to hit. Once Upon a Time is no longer an out for us. Another Thoughtseize is not the worst. This is going to let us hit the Unflinching Courage. Our opponent just has lands in hand, and now we need to hit. So our opponent is just making a few sequencing errors. Again, they should not have played this Botanical Sanctum, I don't think, because this is the only card in their hand we didn't know about, and I think that they could gain some value by concealing information. Like if we drew another Thoughtseize, we probably would have cast it if they hadn't played this, but now we know that there's basically no reason to cast another discard spell. They reveal a Breeding Pool to their Once Upon a Time. They play that. We're going to take another 2 points of damage. We're down to 10. I don't want to Abrupt Decay the Griff Spoon because this is something they can get back at their leisure. Man, and then we can also maybe get a creature into play and then Abrupt Decay the Griff Spoon and kill their Glade Cobra Scout. We need to find a land. A little unlucky to not find a land, a Caryatid, or Once Upon a Time in 4 draw steps, but that happens sometimes. Alright, well, I'm going to use my mana and decay the Griff Spoon. I still do think if our opponent keeps bricking and if we hit a green source this turn, we're going to be in okay shape. Looks like they're going to bring back the Griff Spoon. They could be doing something else here. Hard to say. They are bringing back the Griff Spoon. We're going to take 2 down to 6. Maybe it was better to have discarded the Abzan. I'm not sure. Okay. We hit a green source. Took 6 draw steps, but we hit one of our 19 outs. There's another land on top, but it does come into play tapped. But if our opponent continues to brick and we can destroy the Griff Spoon, we're going to be okay. I don't think... one All That Glitters isn't going to do it because they need to find another enchantment here, basically. Because if they don't have another enchantment, we can destroy the Griff Spoon and then block the Gladecover Scout with Corsair Crewfix, which will probably win the game. It all comes down to, do they draw an enchantment here? Our opponent has drawn really poorly, and I think that they're not unlikely at all to find an enchantment here. It's a second second Griff Spoon, and now our Abrupt Decay does not do anything. Let's go ahead and pack it up. So... really weird game, weird match. I do think that this is a good match to showcase. One, I think that when you are unfavored in a matchup, I like to keep hands that are high risk, high reward like this. I know it didn't work out this game, but I do think this hand was a keep. If we needed to find, a green source, or Once Upon a Time, or Sylvan Caryatid. But if we did, and I think that we saw with how awkward our opponent's hand was, I think we would have won this game if we were just able to cast our spells. And we also saw how, because we are constructing our deck to fight a very specific metagame, we lose percentage points against a deck like Bogles. So, an informative match. We're 0-1. Let's go ahead and get into round 2. We're on the play for round number 2. Another one-lander. Let's go ahead and send this back. I'm certainly going to keep this hand. I think we're going to put back a Corsair of Crewfix. Might look a little weird, but one thing I have found playing this deck is that Corsair of Crewfix and Castle Locthwain play very well together. Being able to time your Castle Locthwains, I think, matters a lot. And knowing when a good time to activate it with Castle, I think is when to activate your Castle, because you can see the top card with Corsair, I think is very relevant. And of course, Corsair is a little worse in multiples. So we're going to just play our Temple Garden tapped here. There's no reason to Once Upon a Time here. There's not a creature we could find on turn 1 to play, and there's also not a land that we would really rather play over Temple Garden this turn. So we're just going to play Temple Garden tapped and pass. Opponent plays Hinterland Harbor. If this is Nexus, we're going to be in trouble. I do think Nexus is certainly our worst matchup. Pretty happy, though, to find a Sylvan Caryatid. I think that was the best creature we could have found here. Okay, this is not Nexus, thankfully. This is some kind of Sultai deck, and it's a Sultai Graveyard deck. Very interesting. They mill over a Merfolk Secret Keeper and a Jace Friend's Prodigy, and they have the choice of putting Watery Grave or Breeding Pool into their hand. They choose the Watery Grave. Let's go ahead and play the Corsair of Crewfix using Sylvan Caryatid mana to be able to play a land off the top if we find one. We did not find a land on the top, but there is a Legion's End, and I imagine the Exile Clause is going to be relevant in this matchup. Seems like a matchup that will be fine against, with access to 3 Scavenging Oozes. I'm not too worried about this about these shenanigans. Ooh, maybe they're doing something a little spicier. They mill over an Eldritch Evolution and a Tasigur the Golden Fang. So I suppose they're trying to sacrifice Tasigur to Eldritch Evolution and put something big into play, but I can't think off the top of my head like what huge big payoffs there is in Pioneer to Eldritch Evolution like your Tasigur into. Let's go ahead and Legion's End the Stitcher Supplier. I do like being able to exile this and not letting them get value off the mill. And we get to take a look and see what's going on. Okay. Okay, so they're trying to put in Ashen Rider and Agents and Treachery off of Eldritch Evolution. Very cool. Very cool deck for our opponent. So next turn they could sacrifice Satyr Wayfinder to Blood for Bones back Tasigur. I think that would be okay if they did that, getting back the Tasigur. Although maybe not, because then that would enable them to Neoform the turn after. Probably. So I guess the question is, do we think that they're going to cast Jace, or are they going to cast Blood for Bones on the Tasigur? And I feel like they would probably cast the Jace. So let's hold up the Abrupt Decay for Jace Fringe Prodigy and hope that that's what our opponent ends up casting here. Interesting. So they're gonna go. They are gonna put the Tasigur back in play. Maybe I misevaluated what our opponent would do here, and they put the Merfolk Secret Keeper back in their hand, and now they can get an Agent of Treachery or an Ashen Rider. Oh no, there's an Ooze on top. Oh, damn it. So if we had just decayed the Satyr Wayfinder, we could have drawn into the Ooze, and maybe that would have been way better. Just maybe. I do think that the play this turn is just going to be Questing Beast, attack, and then decay the Jace Fringe Prodigy on the way back. And we get to untap with Ooze. Our opponent is going to get an Agent of Treachery, I imagine. Could get an Ashen Rider. Our opponent's deck is very cool. I haven't seen anybody doing anything like this in Pioneer. Certainly a format where there is lots of room for brewing. Oh, a Dragon Lord Atarka. Well, this is not something I expected to see. Potentially beatable. Okay, well, Abrupt Decay, Rotting Regisaur. I am loving my opponent's deck. I think it's really cool. Okay, there's a Liliana, the Last Hope on top. We can't activate Castle Locthwain and play Liliana, but we can activate Castle Locthwain and potentially hit a land off the top. Is that better than just... I think we, because of how we tapped, we were kind of committed to activating Castle, but we should have thought about it a little bit more. No land on top for Courser, but there is an Obsidat. So we take 9 down to 13. Our opponent probably a little bit out of gas at this point. Oh, they also have Palaka Worm, very cool. So holding up Scavenging Ooze will be able to stop our opponent from flashing back their Blood for Bones. Play Isolated Chapel off the top, and now we have 2 activations of Scavenging Ooze available. So white, black, green. This is going to be close. I don't think I want to activate Scavenging Ooze in case our opponent finds a second copy of Blood for Bones. Then something they could do is if we were to grow our Ooze in combat, and we would have only done that if they hadn't blocked with the Satyr Wayfinder, theoretically. But one thing they could do to make us not want to grow the Ooze is they could target a Blood for Bones with Jace, make us use our 1 green mana, and then they could just cast a Blood for Bones from hand. Blood for Bones does not target, which is kind of a little bit of a good tech against Graveyard Hate. Our opponent's just going to hard cast an Agent of Treachery, which is tough here. I think we should certainly exile Blood for Bones here. And then they have 2 copies of Eldritch Evolution. I don't really want to put a counter on the Ooze since it's going to their side of the field. Let me think of the life. I guess we should have thought, but we're going to go to 18 off the Obsidat. Take 9 from Atarka. Yeah, we need to gain 1 life here, so let's exile Ashen Rider. And this should give us enough life to not die to just Dragon Lord Atarka hits. Our opponent is going to gain life off of their own Scavenging Ooze, which is kind of tough. I'm a little confused. I mean, I guess our opponent wanted to hold back Atarka to block Obsidat. But now we're just going to get to Questing Beast, which is also a card they knew about. And they have to block Questing Beast with Atarka because Agent of Treachery cannot block. And so we're going to get our opponent to also lose their Agent of Treachery here. And let's play Liliana the Last Hope. And I'm going to minus Liliana. This gives us a second look at seeing a land off the top with Courser. Also, we don't want to draw that Thoughtseize, and we get to put a Questing Beast in our hand. Whereas, if we waited, then they could have oozed both beasts next turn. Still Thoughtseize on top. But we're in good shape. Our opponent doesn't have a Blood for Bones in their graveyard. We have an Obsidat flickering. Our opponent lost their Dragon Lord Atarka. Very cool game we're playing. I don't think we've played perfectly, and I think a little bit of that is due to inexperience against this spicy brew. Looks like our opponent's 7 mana targets are Dragon Lord Atarka, Agent of Treachery, and Pelakka Worm and Ashen Rider. I wonder if our opponent has an 8-drop to put like to Neoform their Agent of Treachery into. Excuse me. Not sure. I'm a little surprised to see my opponent going with the self-mill plan rather than just more ways to discard the fatties as they come to their hand, or maybe something like Grizzly Salvage instead of Merfolk Secret Keeper and Stitcher Supplier, although I guess those cards enable their delve spells, so they can delve quickly and then Neoformer evolution those into a big 7-drop. Surely our opponent has at least one 8-drop to find because they have Eldritch Evolution. I'm not immediately thinking of any insane 8-drops our opponent could have. My knowledge of what's a good 8-drop creature in Pioneer is a little limited. Okay, so our opponent's getting back Dragon Lord Atarka. Interesting. They can kill both Liliana and Courser of Kruphix, which is tough. And they can activate Scavenging Ooze twice. And then they can Blood for Bones next turn as well. So if we Thoughtseize, we can't activate Castle Lock Dwayne. So I think we're going to cast Questing Beast, then activate Castle. I think activating Castle is more important here than casting Thoughtseize, but if we do hit a black source, we can cast the Thoughtseize here. Scavenging Ooze is not a bad one. I am going to go ahead and attack with the Questing Beast, although this, yeah, if we don't attack with the Questing Beast, then they will get to just Agent of Treachery this. If we attack, they have to block and they won't have a good target for Agent of Treachery, and we know they can put an Agent of Treachery into play next turn because there's a Blood for Bones here. Sorry, I feel like I said that super fast. Obsidat's been doing some serious work. I think this card is just very well positioned in Pioneer. Super powerful. magic card. Okay, so they're gonna, I'm sure, eat 2 things here. I do like getting this ooze off the field. Them gaining life every turn was gonna make it to where draining them out with Abzan would take a lot of time. So I am glad that that is off the field now. We have access to our own copy. Although our opponent could potentially Agent of Treachery this ooze depending on what they have going on. Palaka Worm to gain 7 life. Oh boy, not making it easy at all, opponent. Alright, we take 8 down to 12, and then we're going to Abzan up to 14. Siege Rhino's not bad. We can Siege Rhino ooze and hold up an activation for Jace. Do we want to Thoughtseize? Kind of don't think we do. I don't think our opponent has a good last card. I think we're just not going to cast this Thoughtseize. I think the 2 life loss matters too much here. Because if we Thoughtseize, that means we have to block something if they attack with both. I guess we don't. We don't have to block something if we eat something with ooze. Let's just hold up 2 ooze activations. Ooze can attack through Palaka Worm next turn, which is very cool. If we use all of the mana to eat creatures, that is. Seeing a little bit how well Siege Rhino plays with Abzan, just continuing the drain plan. Pretty powerful interaction. Our opponent is getting close to a Jace ultimate, but I don't think that's going to be very impactful on this board. I wonder if our opponent has any like Sylvan Caryatids that hard cast Dragonlord Atarkas or Ashen Riders that they draw. I think we want these Duresses and the 3rd ooze out of the board. Just thinking about sideboard is usually a good way to spend your mental energy when your opponent's deep in the tank and you don't have many choices to make. They're going to shrink our Scavenging Ooze. Interesting. Crazy that our Abzan midrange deck is competing so hard with Dragonlord Atarkas and Agent of Treachery's Palaka Worms. And I think that it's due in no small part to Abzan, which I think has triggered at least 5 times this match. Right, now we'll cast the Thoughtseize. Life loss matters less when our opponent's not attacking, and okay, so our opponent just doesn't have an 8-drop to Neoform into, which seems like that's probably a little bit of a deck building mistake. Hard to say if we don't know the content of our opponent's deck or the content of their heart, but could be. I'm gonna pay life with the Godless Shrine so we have more ooze activations, and then getting it out of our hand before we activate Castle deals 1 less damage to us. Just going to exile our Abzan again. We're not going to get milled out by Jace Telepath and Bound. I don't think that that's much of a concern right now. And if they try to start milling themselves, I don't think that that's going to be super beneficial for them with an ooze in play. I don't think our opponent has an 8-mana spell in their deck to find with Eldritch Evolution. you know, immediately thinking about it, I can't think of a crazy 8-drop to get in Pioneer. I'm sure that there is one, but there's no Gristlebrand. There's no like Iona is not in the format and it's 9 mana. Elishnorr is not in the format and it's 7 mana. Don't think they could benefit much from a Borborygmos. But you'd think with you know, these 7 mana spells that benefit from dying, you'd want to play 1 8-drop to get. Looks like our opponent might have drawn a Tasigur the Golden Fang. They tapped a swamp and then untapped it. So I kind of think that they have a Tasigur. I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit, and I'm going to eat a couple of creatures in response with the ooze so they can't delve them away. I'm just going to use 2, maybe use 3 ooze activations. Yeah, let's use 3. I think I'm going to still hold up one activation, but I think my opponent's last card is, or the card that they drew is a Tasigur, and I think that they decided to plus first for whatever reason. Then they are passing, so I'm not sure what's going on then. Let me just go ahead and activate ooze again. I don't think there's very much that punishes us for using that extra mana. Get Obsidat back. They're dead to another Obsidat or a Siege Rhino. Fatal Push is not the best draw. Let's go ahead and shock. And then I guess I'll leave up. No, let's leave up. We still have double black if we draw Murderous Rider with Sylvan Caryatid. Leave up as much green as we can. Oh yeah, let's jam here. Let's jam here. We have 4 lethal attackers. One of our opponent's 2 cards is Neoform. I'm not sure what their last card could be. Cool. So, despite our opponent getting to play 2 Dragonlord Tatarkas, a Pelakka Worm, and an Agent of Treachery, we still beat them. Which is crazy. Crazy, crazy. Very cool match. Glad I was recording. So, let's bring in the Scavenging Ooze. Bring in 2 Duress. I don't think the Fatal Pushes... I suppose they have Jace, Fringe Prodigy. Ultimate Price kills Agent of Treachery and Pelakka Worm, but I don't think we really care that much about the Agent of Treachery body. Certainly wasn't prepared for this matchup, I'll tell you that much. 4th Questing Beast seems good. Questing Beast is just a very, very strong card. Don't think I like Blood Baron very much against the Agent of Treachery deck. I think 1 Liliana, 2 Fatal Push sounds fine to me. Let's go ahead and run it like this. Weird league so far. Weird league so far. Bogles and Sultai Neoform. This hand is really good. Duress into Scavenging Ooze. Ooze seems very important for this matchup. Opponent has mulligan to 6. One card I'm surprised I didn't see out of my opponent's deck was Once Upon a Time. I would have thought that card would have been, you know, an easy 4 of. And we didn't see our opponent's entire deck, but they did mill over a lot of cards and we didn't see one. Our opponent decided to go for Stitcher Supplier instead of Thoughtseize, which seems a little strange to me. They milled over an Atarka, a Supplier, and a Thoughtseize. I'm going to go ahead and Thoughtseize. Yeah, if they drew a land, then we don't get to take anything with Thoughtseize, but if they drew a land, it's still kind of good for us because they're flooding out really hard. And if they drew a spell, we get to take it. So I think I like the Thoughtseize there. Our opponent drew Jace. Let's go ahead and Fatal Push the Jace and play Scavenging Ooze. And I think if we get to untap with Scavenging Ooze here, it'll be hard to lose. If our opponent goes land, Blood for Bones, return Dragonlord Atarka, it's going to be tough, but they have to have top decked it. Uh-oh. Oh, boy. Okay, they did. They top decked it, and they got a Dragon Lord of Tarka in play, and they returned a Jace Friend's Prodigy. So, and we're gonna Swift in this. Our opponent's gonna play Jace, and we don't have an answer to that Jace. And that was tough. That was really tough. We're still certainly playing Magic, but that was kind of the worst possible. That being said, our opponent is out of spells in their hand, and we drew 2 Murderous Riders, which we needed to find, you know, answers to their spells. So we drew pretty well as our opponent. Questing Beast is a very fast clock. It's going to end this game in no time. Opponent is going to Satyr Wayfinder. They mill over an Agent of Treachery, so if they can top deck another Blood for Bones, they'll be able to steal our Questing Beast. Siege Rhino drains our opponent down to 9. We attack our opponent down to 5, and then they need a top deck to stay alive because this can't be blocked by Satyr Wayfinder, and this has Trample. Eldritch Evolution for a 3 or up to a 4 mana spell, rather. And then they conceded. So, very cool deck from our opponent. Certainly respect the brew. And we advance to 1-1. See you guys in the next round. Okay, so we're on the draw for game 3. Recurring trend in this league is that we just have 1 land hands that we need to mulligan. This hand looks quite strong. Let's keep it. I think we're gonna put back Temple Garden here. That way we have double black off of Carroted for Liliana. If we draw a land in the top 3 cards, we get to Siege Rhino on turn 3, Thoughtseize and the Carroted into Rhino, just like we're playing a Theros Con standard. Our opponent has kept 7 cards in their hand. They're stopped in their upkeep here. I wonder if that means they're going to Once Upon a Time on their upkeep for some flair. So Blooming Marsh for our opponent. So our opponent has a Murderous Rider and a Thoughtseize. Let's take the Thoughtseize, and then let's have the intent of playing Sylvan Carroted on turn 2, and then the Rhino the turn after. And if they Murderous Rider the Rhino, we could get it back with Liliana. Playing a Sultai midrange deck, interesting. I do think that just Abzan with the between Siege Rhino, Obsidat, and Blood Baron, just the green cards are a little bit better positioned than the blue cards. That being said, Jace Friend's Prodigy and Obsidat are still both very powerful, and I think that even if the cards aren't super well positioned, you can maybe just power through. Second Gilded Goose. One reason, we're kind of seeing it here, a reason why I personally have shied away from playing Gilded Goose in my just rock style strategies is they're bad top decks, and I think that you want to maximize your number of good top decks. We are playing Sylvan Carroteds, but we're only playing 2 copies, and I imagine they're playing 4. And Sylvan Carroted makes a little more sense on our curve. And this card does block. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little too critical of Gilded Goose. This is a card that gains you 3 life a turn in the late game. But certainly just not a powerful top deck here. Just about any spell would be better than a Gilded Goose on this board. So they're going to play a Murderous Rider, and now we can Liliana Last Hope get back Siege Rhino, and then hold up Sylvan Caryatid to block the Murderous Rider. It's a little tempting to Abrupt Decay the Jace now, but I think we can just Abrupt Decay it on instep, and we also get to keep our Siege Rhino. We have the choice between Siege Rhino or Murderous Rider. I'll take the Rhino. I'll take the Rhino because we have a Decay for the Jace. I'm enjoying this game. This is a pretty cool game. Opponent discards an Urborg. A card I honestly don't love in decks like this. We're notably not playing it. I think that if you're already playing a bunch of Castle Lockdwains, which I think you should be doing, Urborg gets a little bit worse. You don't need that many like untapped black sources, I guess. You know, like there's just it, and you know, you only have a couple of double black spells. It does help your opponent's mana sometimes. Will always help it if your opponent has Fabled Passage, and if your opponent is a black deck, will help it. Just a card I'm not super high on. Let's use our mana efficiently and play Blood Baron of Viscopa. Liliana is going to shrink the Murderous Rider. It's going to be difficult for our opponent to kill this, although an Oko can turn this into an Elk. So we're going to board out our Blood Barons, I imagine. Looks pretty good on this board, though. If our opponent does play an Oko, then we can get back Murderous Rider with Liliana here. Alright, let's Thoughtseize. I wonder if we can turn Blood Baron into a 10/10. But it just has 2 lands, which is not the most surprising thing. They're gonna, you know, get to activate their Gilded Gooses, their Gilded Geese. So we're going to put our opponent down to 10. I'm just less concerned with winning the game and more concerned with turning Blood Baron on. Although it may be difficult with our opponent gaining all this life every turn to hit that critical threshold. We lose our Liliana, which is sad. But our opponent didn't top deck a more relevant spell than Abrupt Decay, so I think that's fine for us. I'm gonna Once Upon a Time now in case we draw Questing Beast. And I suppose I'm going to... I guess that doesn't... I was going to play the Swamp, so that would increase the number of Ooze activations we could hit, but that's not actually going to change anything. We do find Questing Beast, though, which is going to be really, really good on this board. Our opponent concedes. Awesome. Yeah, Questing Beast is so powerful. I think that once... if Field of the Dead / Mono Black get banned, or not banned, but nerfed. Field of the Dead would be banned, but Mono Black would be nerfed with like a Copter ban. I would probably just play the 4th Questing Beast instead of the 1st Blood Baron. So we're playing against Sultai midrange. I think I would like the 4th Questing Beast. I think we're going to cut Blood Baron because it is soft to Oko. I do tend to like to trim, if not cut, all my discard spells in the... like Black-Green X mirrors. They're just such bad top decks in the late game. Let's bring in our Gideons, our Oozes. Probably want access to... probably don't want these Legions Inns. Do want access to the 3rd copy of Fatal Push. And then we can play like our 2nd Thoughtseize. We can play 1 Noxious Grasp, which kills Oko. This also kills our opponent's like Scavenging Ooze. Yeah, I'll play 2 Noxious Grasps and 0 Thoughtseizes. Again, you want your top decks to be high impact. Looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and go to game number 2. We have a very interesting hand on the draw for game 2 against Sultai midrange. I think we're going to keep. This is a matchup where I don't like to mulligan because card advantage matters a lot. We do have a 2-3-4 curve, which is not something to turn your nose at. And even though we don't have black mana, we are only one black source away from casting Rhino. Courser Crufix can help us find a black source, and we have lots of draw steps. So this hand is weird, but I think it is a keep. Opponent's going to go Swamp Thoughtseize. Yeah, our opponent is electing to keep in their Thoughtseizes, and I think it's fine to keep in some number. We have enough cards to board out that I don't think we want any copies, but I could see Thoughtseize being... It's probably better on their side of the field to protect Jace and Oko. Their 2 and 3 mana threats matter more than ours. I think that we are the control deck, kind of, where we're trying to stop their cheaper threats. Questing Beast is decent against Oko. Scavenging Ooze is decent against Jace. Would like to find some Abrupt Decays, though. I'd be feeling a little bit safer if we had an Abrupt Decay or a Murderous Rider. So our opponent pretty clearly has an answer to the Scavenging Ooze. I think that I would like to just play my Temple Garden and pass, because we don't have a play for next turn in our hand, and so we just make our opponent waste their mana this turn, and then we can play Ooze next turn and, you know, potentially gain a life with Courser of Crufix, or, you know, eat their Thoughtseize for Delve. But, you know, the important thing is we just make them eat up 2 turns of mana instead of letting them kill our Scavenging Ooze on our instep and then letting them use their mana however they want. And so if they commit another threat besides, or if they play a spell besides holding up mana to kill Scavenging Ooze, then we get to play Ooze, and they have to use the mana to kill Ooze later. Our opponent takes Questing Beast because the card is absurd. They play Jace Friend's Prodigy, so let's go ahead and Abrupt Decay Jace. I think just letting them get a loot is not something we're super interested in. We have an interesting choice between Siege Rhino and Ooze. I'll probably play Rhino because it dodges Abrupt Decay, and our opponent was representing Abrupt Decay. Our opponent does not have a land in hand, so I think that it's safe to play Rhino here. And then we'll try to let our Scavenging Ooze control their graveyard a little bit, make it difficult to cast this Dig Through Time. If they hit Fabled Passage off the top, they could have cast Dig Through Time, but we're lucky that they did not. Our opponent has a Liliana the Last Hope, which is very good here to make it where we can't attack with the Rhino. Okay, so I do like the Abrupt Decay here. I think we're going to Abrupt Decay Courser of Crufix. So let's Scavenging Ooze, and then Abrupt Decay Courser, attack Liliana. We know our opponent is drawing Kalitas, and so they can't cast either Dig or the Kalitas next turn. And if they minus their Liliana, we will eat Scavenging Ooze in response, and that will also kill their Liliana. I'm sorry, we'll eat Courser Crufix with Scavenging Ooze in response. We do know our opponent has Dig Through Time in their hand, and they are very likely to have Abrupt Decay in their hand, because they shocked on turn 2. But I'd rather them have a Jace than be able to hit their land drops with Courser, theoretically. It would be nice to be able to activate Ooze twice this turn, but we couldn't do that unless we didn't Abrupt Decay Courser, and I think we needed to Abrupt Decay the Courser. They're going to shrink the Rhino rather than rather than minus Lily, and they're going to abrupt decay the ooze. Well, let's go ahead and eat their Courser. So we know the hand is Dig Through Time, Kalitas, Mystery card. Not a great draw. Let's go ahead and get Liliana down to 1 loyalty so they can't just get back Jace next turn. We're going to hope that they keep stumbling on their land drops here. Would have been nice, of course, to draw something big to pressure them, but that would have been kind of insane. Let's Once Upon a Time before attacks to see if we hit a Questing Beast. We hit either a Siege Rhino or a Scavenging Ooze. I think I'm more interested in the Ooze because we know about the Dig Through Time in their hand, and Ooze is just going to be bigger than Rhino at this point in the game. Gonna attack Liliana. We know 2 of our opponent's cards still. Important to keep, reminding yourself. Be thinking about what your opponent's thinking about. It seems like they have an answer to the Siege Rhino. It's probably a Murderous Rider, a Noxious Grasp, or an Assassin's Trophy. If they have Fatal Push, they can push the Rhino, but not until after we get to kill Liliana, the Last Hope. I do like the addition of Once Upon a Time in this deck. It just makes your top decks a little bit better, increases your range of keepable hands. I could certainly see finding room for a 4th copy. I've liked 3 so far. A really hard card to deck build with, I think, sometimes. A little bit easier in like the mono green devotion decks where it's very obvious you want to play 4. But it affects, your land count in a way. It affects a lot. It's certainly a hard card to build with, in my opinion. All right, so let's eat the Jace now. So if our opponent draws a land for Dig Through Time, they can't delve away a creature that we could eat with Ooze, but we can't actually eat enough with Ooze to stop them from casting Dig Through Time if they find a blue source here. And they did find a blue source here. They go with the Kalitas rather than the Dig Through Time, though. So we could try to keep them off of Dig with Scavenging Ooze here, or we could just eat Courser, Questing Beast, Ooze, and attack our opponent for 7. I think I like that because then that's lethal next turn. This is lethal next turn. If our opponent even if they attack with their Kalitas, they would have to chump block with their Kalitas to not die, and then if they spend their next turn just casting Dig Through Time, then they won't be able to very likely deal with the Ooze unless they dig into exactly land Fatal Push. So I like eating all 3 creatures here, and then I think that we should also eat our opponent's like a Fatal Push. That way it makes their Dig Through Time cost 1 more mana, so it would be harder for them to like Dig Through Time into a Fatal Push or Dig Through Time into land Abrupt Decay. I guess our opponent's considering chump blocking here. I will say if our opponent chump blocks, we're just going to go after their graveyard with Scavenging Ooze pretty clearly. I don't think I would recommend chump blocking here. I can't really envision that being a good play. Our opponent decides it's not a good play, so let's go ahead and eat Courser, Questing Beast, Ooze. And then let's eat our opponent's... I'm targeting Fatal Push because of Jace Friend's Prodigy, but we're just basically targeting any card here to make their Dig Through Time cost more mana. So now our opponent is up 4. Even if they gain 3 life off Kalitas, they are dead to the Ooze attack. We know one of our opponent's cards is Dig Through Time. They have a mystery card, and then they have their draw step. Super key turn here. Our opponent is stopped on their upkeep. They're playing a little slowly. I don't know if they have, you know, bad internet or if they are thinking really hard. So it's sometimes hard to tell. A lot of times I think you can kind of think that your opponent's deep in the tank about something, but in reality they have bad internet or they're cooking or something. I think it's important on Magic Online to not take long pauses too seriously. But in paper, you should certainly think about why your opponent is pausing during decisions. Opponent makes the attack. They play a tapped Blooming Marsh. And they play another Kalitas. Interesting. And they're going to chump block with this one. I don't know if I love this play. I feel like I would have rather just cast Dig Through Time. And then, if I was my opponent, I think I would have rather liked to see them cast Dig Through Time. And then chump block with this Kalitas. And then Dig Through Time into an answer for Ooze. And then play Kalitas and then kill the Ooze next turn. So I don't think I liked my opponent's play here. Our opponent has no choice here. They have to block Scavenging Ooze. We know that their last card is Dig Through Time. It is kind of interesting here. Do we just eat 4 cards out of their yard with Ooze, or do we play Siege Rhino? I think we're just going to eat the Kalitases with Ooze and then play Siege Rhino, and then there's not really anything our opponent can Dig Through Time into if they have to spend 4 mana for Dig Through Time to beat Ooze plus Rhino here. Oh, I guess they gain 3, so Rhino on its own is not lethal. But also Ooze on its own is not lethal because it's just 9 power. So let's play the Rhino. Let's play the Rhino. Opponent's last card is Dig Through Time. They get their draw step. I really doubt our opponent is playing something like a Crux of Fate or any sweeper in this for this spot. Languish wouldn't do it. Ritual of Soot wouldn't do it. I imagine it's all spot removal. Our opponent could draw Fatal Push Scavenging Ooze, and then Dig Through Time into, you know, land Noxious Grasp or Fabled Passage Fatal Push. But that would be, you know, obviously a really unlikely series of events. But it would be potentially how our opponent gets out of this spot. I do imagine the Ooze is going to die here at least. I imagine with a Dig Through Time and a draw step, our opponent can assemble either just Fatal Push or land Abrupt Decay, land Noxious Grasp. But they whiffed, and we advanced to 2-1 in this league. GG's, I'll see you for round number 4. Alright, so we are on the draw for round number 4, and we have a hand that we don't have to mulligan in game 1. Pretty sure this is the first 7 we're keeping in game 1. In this video, at least. I've kept a 7-card hand in game 1 in other matches of Magic in the past. Pretty easy Fatal Push, kill the bird. Our opponent is probably playing blue-green Stompy, but it could be a couple of other shells. Half-Ship Oasis looks like Stompy to me. I'm going to cast the Thoughtseize instead of Scavenging Ooze. I'm a little worried about our opponent casting an Oko. Oh, I think it was a mistake, actually, to not play a land first, because our opponent plays 4 Stubborn Denial. Yeah, I think it was a mistake to not play a land first. Our opponent doesn't have Stubborn Denial, and they do have an Oko, but they have a backup Oko. So taking one of the Thief of Crowns doesn't look too appealing here. I think we should just take Questing Beast and then hope that we draw well. Excuse me. So one thing I like is if we can find another green source, we can play Ooze and then eat 2 creatures, so then our opponent can't steal the Ooze with Oko, but we can't do that this turn. think we're just going to play Liliana in plus, and then our opponent's going to be able to attack Liliana with their Elk down to 1 loyalty. But if we can find, you know, Abrupt Decay, a green source for Ooze, Questing Beast, even a Siege Rhino would not be bad here. Abzan would be good. We certainly need a draw. Opponent's going to play out their Wicked Wolf, which I think is a good play. Okay. How do I feel about Abrupt Decay here? I'm not sure. I think I like it as a draw, but I'm not sure what we're doing with it, I should say. I think we're going to shrink the food token, play Ooze, and Abrupt Decay this Oko now. And then we can block this food token with Ooze. We're going to lose our Liliana to Wicked Wolf probably. It's possible we're going to want to chump block with Scavenging Ooze, but I think that we're just going to let the Liliana go. Yikes. And we know our opponent's last card in hand is Oko. So Liliana down. We're going to go to 17. Well, if our opponent elks the Ooze, it will be a 4/4 creature here. So what our opponent should do is they should just attack with everything and then elk the Ooze post-combat, but that might not be something that they realize that this is going to be a 4/4. They might just elk the Ooze before attacks here. They might also make a food to be able to sack to their Wicked Wolves, and that looks like what our opponent is doing. This is a pretty aggressive attack, although I think it's a good attack. It means that their Oko is a little bit vulnerable to, if we top deck a green source, we can just pump counters on the Scavenging Ooze and kill the Oko, but we're probably dead on the backswing if we do that with these half-shep Oasises. I'm not sure what our out is here. A green source lets us kill Oko. Oh no, there's none. There's 1 too few creatures in the yard, so that's not true. Did draw a green source. I think we just need to activate Castle Locked-Wain and hope to draw like an Abrupt Decay, although that doesn't even quite do it. This has been an interesting game. Maybe we would have been in it if we had drawn Siege Rhino that turn, but we did not draw Siege Rhino that turn. And let's go ahead and go to game 2, where I would like the 3rd copy of Fatal Push. I would like both copies of Noxious Grasp. I've liked 2 Thoughtseize in this matchup so far. I think I want 0 copies of Legionid. It really only kills their mana elves. And I think I want the 4th copy of Questing Beast, which I also believe we've boarded in every match of this league. And let's board out the Blood Baron and bring in the 3rd Ooze. This looks pretty good to me. I have found this matchup to be a little favorable for Abzan, and let's hope that we can beat him in games 2 and 3. On the play for game 2. I'm going to keep this hand. We don't have any green mana. But we do have a Grasp on turn 2, which we can use to kill a mana elf, and we can Murderous Rider on turn 3, and we have 3 looks at a green source for Siege Rhino. Certainly seems like a keep to me. We also could draw a Once Upon a Time on turn 1. That would be another look at a green source. Our opponent kept 7 as well. While our opponent is in the tank, it's a good time to remind you to hit that subscribe button. You're trying to post weekly recorded videos to YouTube. I primarily stream on twitch.tv/Aspiringspike. Stream every weekday, Monday through Friday at 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time to 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you guys want to see more Pioneer and Modern content on there. Could have played Chapel this turn, but one thing I like to be in the habit of is if I'm planning on, if I have a shock land and I have an untapped land like an Isolated Chapel or a Castle Locked Dwayne, and I know I'm going to want to hold up 3 mana next turn, kind of regardless, I usually like to shock the turn before, and that way it's just a little less obvious that we have a Murderous Rider here. If we had played the Isolated Chapel last turn, and then Noxious Grasp, the Gilded Goose, and then this turn we shock the Overgrown Tomb, it would be really obvious we have a Murderous Rider Swift in, and I think our opponent would be a little less likely to play into it here. So if they do go for Oko, which we can Swift End, our opponent can make an Elk, or they can just make another food. It seems like a hard decision. I'm not sure what our opponent's going to choose. They go ahead and go for the Elk. Well, let's go ahead and get the Oko off the field. And then Siege Rhino can outclass the Elk pretty well, unless they have another Oko, which would be bad news. If our opponent, if we draw a green source, I think we're still playing Rhino because it plays around another Oko a little bit better. Obviously we don't have a choice now that we didn't draw a green source, but if we had, then we could have gone push plus Questing Beast next turn and very likely killed our opponent's Oko with the Elked Rhino. Just something to be thinking about. Always be thinking, even when your mana is tapped. Love to draw another green source. Next turn, if we don't, we can play Murderous Rider and Fatal Push if we draw another double green spell. Our opponent plays their own Questing Beast. I think I'm going to trade here. I think this is a trade that's just going to happen down the line. Let's go ahead and get this Thoughtseize cast. Our opponent has another Questing Beast and another Oko, which is tough. Admittedly, very tough. I think that we need to take the Oko. I'm going to play the Corsair Crewfix here. I think that we want to get just a little bit of card advantage going if we can. This blocks our opponent's board pretty well. It's going to gain us life while we're at 6. I think I like this more than Questing Beast on this board. We get punished if our opponent top decks another Questing Beast. Alright, there's a Siege Rhino. I do like that being on top. Lots of life gain in this deck. Opponent top deck a Forest. I don't think it was correct for them to play out the Forest here, especially against a deck with discard spells. A lot of times you can, trick your opponent into casting their Thoughtseizes if you just are holding a spell in your hand. A good habit to get into. So, Rhinos travel in packs. We're going to probably cast another Rhino next turn and then maybe kill our opponent with a Questing Beast in a few turns. Don't have good attacks here. I will say if we had cast the Questing Beast instead of the Corsair, our opponent would be at, a much lower life total, but I mean this is a fine line we took. Okay, we're gonna trade Rhino for Beast here. That is one thing I like about Rhinos. It trades pretty favorably for questing beasts, and this card is super popular and powerful in Pioneer. Popular and powerful. We could play out our questing beast. I think we just want to play Rhino though. Plays a little more defensively, which I like, and we certainly have the late game between Courser, Crewfix, and Castle Lock Dwayne, and I think our top decks are just on average better than our opponents. I think I like just playing a little bit slower. Our opponent has a lot of... They're effectively at 18 because of Gilded Goose, which is awesome. We might ultimate price this Gilded Goose even. another Siege Rhino. They travel in packs. I don't know if you guys played Khans of Tarkir Standard, but you would just always draw your Rhinos together. Still true in 2019. I think we should ultimate price the Gilded Goose. This represents 3 life a turn, and between like this next Rhino and our 8 power on board, I think we're just gonna change roles a little bit and become the aggro. Although maybe not. Maybe that's bad. Maybe that's wrong. Our opponent's already cast 3 questing beasts. If our opponent draws like a Lovestruck Beast or another questing beast, though, we're really going to want to have this. Yeah, let's hold it. Let's hold it. I think it's probably just too aggressive to go after the goose. When we really are the they're the aggro deck in this matchup. Okay, they conceded. They drew a lot of lands, which is lucky for us because we were certainly under the gun for a while there. I like how we've sideboarded. It's going to be tougher on the draw, but we will do our best. I like this hand. I think Abzan's really good in this matchup. We have 2 1 mana interactive spells, a Fatal Push if they play an elf, and a Thoughtseize if they don't. And we have Courser on 3. I like this hand a lot. They put a Llanowar elf in their hand. We're going to Fatal Push it. Kind of interesting whether or not we Thoughtseize or play Caryatid next turn. Probably just Caryatid, and then we can Courser plus Thoughtseize on turn 3. I will say that, I don't know. Oh no, oh no. Big mistake. Sorry, I was talking and meant to play Temple Garden. Oh my goodness, look at our opponent's hand. Well, really wish we had played Sylvan Caryatid. That would have worked out much better for us. Let's hope our opponent doesn't top deck their 3rd land. Our opponent's deck really does struggle when you fight their mana. It is very vulnerable to you killing their elf. More so than most decks, because their curve is so many. They have so many 1-drops and they have so many 3-drops, but not very many good 2s. I think I wanted to play Courser over Caryatid there. Certainly interesting. Our opponent missed their land drop again, which is great for us, and we hit a Black Source off the top, which is good because we can Liliana kill their human token. Yeah, certainly did not play perfectly this game. I meant to play the Temple Garden on 2 when I was talking. Okay, Gilded Goose is not going to be a permanent mana source, but this will let them play a Steely Champion or an Oko. But our opponent doesn't want to play it out and concedes. And we are 3-1 after losing round 1 to Bogles. Pretty impressive stuff. I'll see you guys for round number 5. On the draw for round number 5, I would really like to play against a Mono Black Aggro or Field of the Dead. Both those decks have been super popular all week, and those are certainly the matchups we're kind of hoping to hit a little bit with this deck. Maybe not so much Field of the Dead, but certainly Mono Black. I think it's something that happens a lot in tournament Magic, where you build, a deck that is specifically trying to target one or two decks of the meta, and then you lose round one to like Bogles, and then you end up playing against not the top tier decks. That'll happen from time to time. Oh, whoops. That happened in the last PTQ I streamed on, I think it was Friday, where we beat Mono Black in round one, and then we lost to, I think it was Blue, Red, and Soul Artifact, and just another kind of non like super popular tier 1 deck. I do think Blue, Red, and Soul is good, but it's not as popular as it has been. Okay, so we're playing against the blue-green Stompy deck again. Our opponent's hand is Questing Beast, Heart of Kirin, and Steel Champion. They also have a Love-Struck Beast in their hand. So just last game, we took our opponent off of their mana, and they couldn't function. Let's see if they miss their land drop again. They can play Heart of Kirin if they miss a land drop, though. So they kind of have an extra turn to hit here. All right, let's go ahead and play Courser of Krufix instead of holding up mana for Swift End. If our opponent misses their land drop, then we won't have a good target for Swift End. Siege Rhino's good. It can trade for either Questing Beast or Steely Champion. I am a little worried about this Heart of Kirin if our opponent can hit a land drop, and they did not. Yeah. Bolt the Bird. Our blue-green Stompy deck, very vulnerable to mana disruption. More so than like almost any deck I've ever seen. Their curve is just all 1 mana and then all 3 mana. They have like 1 or 2 Heart of Kirins sometimes. This isn't even a guaranteed inclusion. And we have 3 Siege Rhinos here, which is awesome. I hope that you are a fan of Siege Rhino. I don't think I'm going to Swift End the Llanowar Elves. I think I'm just going to play another Rhino. Usually that's the correct play. And we can Swift End whatever they block with next turn and then trample over. We also, can Siege Rhino them down to just 1 next turn with this Rhino. Weird that we had 2 games like this in a row where we just, killed the elf and then they never hit 3 lands. 2 games in a row in separate matches. Okay, so our opponent can play Questing Beast, Love-Struck Beast, Steel Leaf Champion, which is not a beast, but it is a pretty good card. I think this card's pretty well positioned against the Field of the Dead decks. I think this and Questing Beast are the main reasons to be stomping people. I will certainly block if our opponent attacks. Our opponent's actually just dead on board though, because they can't crew the Heart of Kirin. They only have yeah, they're dead on board, but we will play it out. So if they block Courser, Siege Rhino, they just die, and they only have 2 blockers. They don't have 3. I don't believe they were dead if they played one of these 3 mana spells. Love-Struck Beast even blocks better than Questing Beast here. So I think that they made the wrong play by playing Questing Beast. They would have lost anyways, but it was just not as good a choice. I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get to see any mono black aggro in any Field of the Dead, but that's magic. That is magic. All right, again, same sideboarding: 2 grass, 1 push, 1 ooze, 1 beast, minus the Legion's Ends, minus the Blood Baron, minus 2 Thoughtseize. Alright, on the draw for game number 2 of match number 5, another 1-lander that we will mulligan. I like this hand a lot. I do think that this turn 1 Fatal Push is so important. And we've been very lucky to have had the turn 1 Fatal Push every time we play against the Stompy deck, I guess. I'm going to put back Godless Shrine instead of Castle Lock Twain. I do think Castle Lock Twain is just really good. Opponent's mulliganing to 6. Yeah, we'll draw another white source. It'll be fine. we need it. A Godless Shrine would be really good in this hand because it gives us double white and double black for castle, but I do think I like putting it back over the castle here. So we have found in the last 2 games that bolting their turn 1 mana accelerant is game over. We'll see if that is true again. I don't think I'm going to Noxious Grasp this Llanowar Elf. I think that I would rather hold up a Grasp for a Questing Beast, Lovestruck Beast, Oko, and not just rely on them being mana screwed here. And then we get to kill whatever they play, and then untap and play Ooze, and then play Questing Beast next turn. Cool. They're probably going to make their food into an Elk, which is a little worse for us than if they had just made another food token. They get to put a 3/3 on the board. Although, I imagine our Ooze will outclass this Elk at some point. I do like drawing Rhino here. Unclear whether we'll Rhino or Questing Beast next turn. It'll depend on what our opponent does, of course. I hope that you guys have at least seen the power of Questing Beast in this game, or not this game, this video, and how well the card plays alongside Siege Rhino and Obsidat. That's just dealing big chunks of damage, and then, you know, you're also draining your opponent with Rhinos and Obsidats. It lets you race most things in the format, which I like a lot. So I mean, we're gonna eat the Gilded Goose in response, and then our opponent can trade Wicked Wolf for Scavenging Ooze here, which I think is just fine with us. Let's Questing Beast. I love that Questing Beast plays offense and defense really well in this deck, and I actually think that we're all of a sudden the aggro deck here with the Siege Rhino. Our opponent, you know, they have 3 cards in their hand. We'll see how out of gas they are. They have a Lovestruck Beast, which this card's very good. They're probably going to trade Questing Beast for it, although maybe we could plan on taking 5 and then using Abrupt Decay. We also Thoughtseize plus Abrupt Decay. I think I like that. I think I like this. As under the gun against this Copter as we would have been if we had played Siege Rhino instead. Drawing that Thoughtseize was really important too. Alright, hope they don't find a Lovestruck Beast here. They do. That was the best possible for them, I think. Lovestruck Beast has really impressed me. I think that card's quite strong. I'm surprised to see our opponent make a human token here instead of just casting the 5/5, because now they don't have a great block for the Siege Rhino. Yeah, I think they should have just made it 5/5 there. So there's nothing we could draw off Castle Locthwain that would change our tax here, because we won't draw into we won't have black mana after we draw, is what I'm trying to say. So let's just attack. I mean, if our opponent you know, puts everything on the Siege Rhino, they go to 1. If they put the food on the Questing Beast, you know, they're still going to 1 here. Yeah, I think it was pretty bad, I think, for our opponent to not just cast their Questing Beast there. I'm sorry, their Lovestruck Beast. It blocks Rhino really well, trades for Questing Beast if they want to. This human yeah, just not a good play, I think. Not a huge difference, I think, between being at 2 and 1 here, because they died to Obsidat and Rhino, kind of the same. I think I would rather see my opponent put the food token and 2/1 power creatures on the Rhino, and at least get the Rhino off the board, and then just keep me with the Questing Beast. This block puts them to the same life as the block I suggested, but they have an Elvish Mystic in play, and but my suggested block, we would just not have a Rhino, and I think it would have been better for them to just trade for the Rhino here. So I'm activating now in case we draw Scavenging Ooze. We'll cast it. We draw Thoughtseize, which is probably one of the worst draws. We only have 2 post board, and this is our second, but at least we get it off of the top of our deck and give us a better chance of drawing an Obsidat or a Rhino or a removal spell next turn. Opponent's is in a tough shape because they're going to play the Lovestruck Beast, and then they need something else to deal with one of our creatures here, because right now these creatures don't block enough to save them from Rhino's trample damage, and they can't block Questing Beast. So I'm not sure what our opponent could have here, because they don't play very many 2-mana spells. It's all 3-mana spells and 4-mana spells. Yeah, I think that they're probably dead here. Just thinking about how their deck usually plays. Oko doesn't do it. Wicked Wolf doesn't do it. I mean, maybe they're playing like one Brazen Borrower, and they could go Lovestruck Beast and Brazen Borrower. That could do it. I have seen, occasionally they play 1 or 2 copies of that card. I mean, if they had an attack with the Copter, they also weren't dead on board. Just some not great sequencing from our opponents today. I think it was a good league. I think that it showcased what this deck is doing pretty well. Although I am sad we didn't get to play against Mono Black Aggro, which is what we're trying to beat up on, and we also didn't play against Fields of the Dead, which I would have liked to showcase Questing Beast and Siege Rhino's prowess in that matchup. But our opponents, I mean, they're gonna, yeah, they're just dead here, just dead on board. I mean, okay, our opponent decides to concede after tanking for 5 minutes, which is fine. Treasure chest, not too impressive. Recruiter of the Guard might be worth something, but hope you guys enjoyed the deck. This is something that I've really been enjoying. I think that it is certainly a metagame call, and I think that this deck is good in the meta right now, and I hope that you pick it up and you maybe adapt the deck for your local meta or as the format evolves. But I've been Aspiringspike. I hope you learned something, and I will see you guys next time.